I feel grateful to be here with you guys and to share some ideas. I think I've got about 45 minutes, so I'm going to discuss obviously the ideas of liberty and voluntarism. I'm really going to try to, I think, ground it a little bit more. We've heard some really good theory and, what do things look like, and answering a lot of tough questions, which are important because inevitably, if you start talking about the idea of how could we live without government or with a lot less government, at least, people come up with all the different questions, some of which were just covered. And so it's good to have those thought experiments and to think like, well, how would we do that? Or what would that look like? I also think it's important that those of us who believe in these ideas, and especially if you're a person who does really identify with the philosophy of voluntarism or libertarianism as we understand it here in the US, that it's actually most important that we actually live these values on a day-to-day basis. Does that make sense to you guys? Because from what I've seen, it's one thing to write about them philosophically, and I've done this. I have a book back there, of some books back there called The Conscious Resistance, where I've sort of thought up my version of what a free world might look like and how we would get there. And I think that's important. It's fun thought experiments. It's philosophical. It also can be sometimes, and excuse me for this, but it can sometimes be intellectual masturbation. It can just be like, we're just getting so deep in it, but what does it actually concrete look like, right? How do you actually apply this to our lives? And so I've really tried to bring that to the movement, so to speak, if you will. And I'm going to be talking today about what I call exit and build, the exit and build strategy, and how we can exit from slavery systems and focus our energy on building new ones and or supporting those who are building new ones. Because there's a lot of areas where maybe we're not the technologist, or we're not the farmer, or we're not the person working on the new energy devices, but we can support those who are and try to incorporate those tools and those resources and ideas into our lives. First, I wanted to read a quote that I wrote down. I was mainly, in terms of libertarianism, voluntarism, my work is mainly inspired by a man named Samuel Edward Konkin III. Is anybody familiar with Konkin or his work? If you follow my work, you've probably heard me reference him over the years. He was super active in the student movements in the 60s and the 70s, and all the way up to his death in 2004. But I think mostly, his sort of heyday was 70s and 80s. And he published a book called The New Libertarian Manifesto, and then another book that was published right after he died called The Agorism Primer, and then another one that was just published a few years ago just called Counter Economics, which was an unfinished book that he never got to fully sort of elucidate his full vision. But in the New Libertarian Manifesto, he says something that I think is really important that I just wanted to share with you guys, and it kind of sets the tone for what I'm going to talk about. Konkin said, the basic principle which leads a libertarian from statism, which is slavery, to a free society is the same that the founders of libertarianism used to discover the theory itself. And that principle is consistency. He says, thus, the consistent application of the theory of libertarianism to every action the individual libertarian takes will create the libertarian society. Does that make sense? And it's basically what I was saying a moment ago, is that it's one thing to have these ideas in sort of philosophical sense, and it's a whole nother to actually incorporate them and live them, and not just say, okay, well, one day when we get to a free place, then I'll live those principles. Then I'll actually act that way. I very much do believe like it's the action-oriented approach of living your self-ownership and practicing that and maintaining your privacy, maintaining your individual liberty, and respecting that in other people, which is going to get us to that place, not waiting around for it to magically appear. So I think that's really important, and that's what we're going to focus on. So Konkin's ideas, his main, I guess, big idea was called agorism, and he took this idea from the Greek word for marketplace, the agora, the agora, and this was, in ancient Greece, this was this kind of like what we see here, this marketplace of people selling their goods, selling their services, whether that's food or jewelry or ideas or information. People who are coming together to debate politics in a healthy way. This is just this beautiful place, the way it's described. And so Samuel Konkin looked at that and thought, perhaps in a future free humanity, we could have these agoras where people would come together and they would exchange goods and resources and ideas, and it would be really beautiful. That was kind of, I guess, that's where he was aiming for. And then, of course, you start to ask, well, how do we get there, right? How do we actually get to that free place? And his approach did not involve politics, it did not involve violence, and it did not involve apathy. And when you throw those three things out the window, most people assume like, well, what else is there, right? That's pretty much all we can do. We can vote, we can try to overthrow the government and violent revolution, and still, we're the right people, put us in charge. Or we can just, tune out, tune in, drop out, all that sort of thing, give up, be apathetic, be nihilistic. Instead, what Konkin believed would be the answer would be what he called counter economics. And I'm going to kind of skip on some of the more like academic side of the conversation. I encourage you guys to look at it, but I just want to set the stage for how I've taken his ideas, and I tried to make them, I think, more accessible and more tangible for us in the digital age, because unfortunately Konkin died in 2004. And although he predicted things like Bitcoin and private cryptos and was very much into encryption and stuff like that, he didn't have a holistic view of the message, which is what I'm going to talk about today. And so unfortunately, he didn't really take care of his health that well, and he died at a pretty young age, which kind of sucks because a lot of his ideas have now come to fruition and he's not around to see it. So it's just another reminder of how important it is to also take care of our health, because I think that's another big area where the libertarian community totally misses out. It's just like all economics, all right brain, academic philosophy, and then sort of no spirituality, no health, no like, and to me, it's a holistic thing. Like there's a way to apply it, and that's what we're going to focus on. But Konkin believed that by taking our time, and more specifically our money, away from the statist mainstream economy, what he called the white market, if we took our money and our resources away from there and we consciously put our energy into black and gray markets, which is basically, he described the counter economy, which is what he called these black and gray markets, as all peaceful economic activity that the state, the government either forbids and says, you know, hey, you can't do that without a license, or they say is illegal. So for example, I know we have some midwives in the room. Being in the counter economy would be like, let's say the government says it's illegal to have a home birth and you do it anyways. You're participating in this counter economy. Let's say the government says it's illegal to sell cannabis to another person. You do it anyways, right? You're not harming anybody. There's no reason that a third party should be involved. And so he imagined if more people could consciously participate in this, not in just some sort of abstract way, because I mean, the counter economy also includes things like yard sales, garage sales, paying your neighbor kid to mow the lawn, all those things you're doing. There's no taxes involved. There's no government involved. It's just two people saying, I have something, you need something here. We agree on the price, we agree on the currency, and it's done. But Konkin was looking at the collapse of the Soviet Union and some other parts of the world. I also took the ideas and looked at Peru and some other places. And you could see that every time the state gets more and more aggressive, especially economically, people start to look for alternatives. Either like, okay, I'm going to try to quote unquote cheat on my taxes a little bit. You're not cheating anything. It's your money. They just want you to believe that. That's the whole reason they say those sort of things. But people will find ways to sort of avoid the state when they can naturally. And so Konkin thought, well, what if we put conscious effort into that? Not just sort of go to the yard sale occasionally, or, you know, buy weed from your friend, or operate without a license or whatever, but consciously as a group coming together and saying, we're going to take our money out of their system. We're going to take our time, our energy away from their system. And so again, he was promoting these ideas. He was not around long enough to see these ideas really take hold around 2010. Anybody remember or was a part of the End the Fed movement in the here in the US, different places, Ron Paul, etc. So that whole thing was pretty much, in many ways, it was an agorist movement, because many people started to realize, okay, well, if I'm not going to use the Federal Reserve note, then what do? I'll deal in silver or precious metals, or I'll barter, or obviously things like Bitcoin or Monero, stuff like that. That's the counter economy right there. That's us saying we're going to take our money, our energy, and I think it's a spiritual thing as well, away from that system, and we're going to put our energy into building new systems or using alternative systems. So that's essentially what agorism and counter economics are. Again, I'm kind of just breezing past. There's a lot of theory in there and stuff you guys can go look at. So I discovered these ideas in the beginning of my sort of journey in 2009, 2010. Again, I heard Ron Paul speak, heard about the Federal Reserve, heard some of my friends, people who are now friends, saying, if we want to end the Fed, we need to stop using the dollar. We need to like focus on our energy. And so I focus our energy elsewhere. So I started getting the silver coins and learned about greenbacks and paper currencies and barter and time sharing, time banks, and all these other really creative ways. And then again, crypto came along and things of that sort. This has sort of been, just for me, a natural way to live. When I started to quote unquote wake up in 2009, I had already stopped using the banking system. This is just my approach. Let me make that clear too as well. Everything I'm about to share is not to say you need to live the way that I'm living if you want to be free. I think anybody who tries to say there's only one path is, you know, being fooled themselves. But I'm sharing directly from my experience. So everything I'm about to share is not just me talking abstractly. These are things that I do. So I was never good at having a bank account. I was 18. I got my first bank account. I think I got a bunch of overdraft fees, and I was like, I kind of suck at this. Maybe I shouldn't own a bank. I own a bank account. And then a couple of years later, I started waking up, Occupy Wall Street and the Fed, et cetera. And I was like, oh, so that's sort of why I had this weird thing with banks, and I just never used a bank again. So I don't use bank accounts. The year I was going to start paying taxes as an adult, my mother had been claiming me as like a 18, 19-year-old, 20-year-old kid. It's the same year I woke up and decided I'm not going to fund genocide and war and surveillance. And so I just never started talking to those people. So I just don't talk to them. And, so for me, it was sort of already part of my lifestyle. And then I discovered Konkin and was like, oh my God, this makes perfect sense. If we want to end these systems, or at least not give them our moral and spiritual and financial support, then we need to focus on using alternative systems or taking our time and energy away from them. So it was just sort of natural for me to continue on the path I was, not talking to the IRS, not dealing with big banks, and trying to have a life outside of their system to some degree. Then I came to realize how important and valuable this was in 2020. Anybody remember 2020? Interestingly, actually, the last time I was here in this room was in 2021 when Miriam and I did the activation tour. It was in the middle of COVID 1984. Was anybody here for that event? A few of you? Yeah, that was a great time. We had a lot of awesome people. We traveled all around the country talking about very similar ideas. The beautiful thing is we got to see them play out in real time and see the people who were forward thinking and who were already thinking about being outside of the system in different ways and building parallel systems were much further ahead and less in panic mode than those who are like, my whole life is ingrained in the system and now they're telling me I can't work without a vaccine or I can't travel. Oh no, I have no food put away. I have no backup plan. I guess I'm going to get it. That's a lot of people had to make that choice to continue traveling or living their life. And I guess my bigger goal is for us to not have to be in that situation, that the more forward thinking we are, the less compromises of our values and principles we'll have to make. So Konkin was all about consistency and using the counter economy. Sometimes people call this the underground economy, the informal economy. The name is essentially irrelevant. The point is that we're trying to create something alternative, something parallel to their systems, that the solutions won't come through politics and it won't come through violence and it definitely won't come through apathy or what people on the internet often call black pilled. Has anybody heard that term recently? So black pilled is just somebody like, the Matrix, you take the red pill, you take the blue pill. Somebody who is black pilled is like, you're so awake, but you're also just nihilistic. Like, we're fucked. There's nothing we can do. Everything's screwed. Any plan you can think of, somebody's just going to be like, oh, you really think they're going to let you grow your own food? Oh, you really think you're going to get land and go and be free? They just have something negative to say for anything, right? So I don't consider myself to be black pilled at all, but I am an adult and I can look around and recognize that politics isn't going to save us and that false heroes are going to keep being presented to us and keep trying to keep us from trying something new and getting out of the system and instead pulling us back in. And they do this every 4 years, which is why it's so important to be having these conversations right now, because we're witnessing mass hysteria around the country right now. In case you haven't noticed, trying to convince us that the answer is to once again do the same old thing and assume that we're going to get different results. So it's so important that we're here having these conversations and thinking about, well, what else can we do? What other alternative solutions are? And so I wrote a book called How to Opt Out of the Technocratic State. I had just published it when I last came here, about a year before that. I wrote it at the end of 2019, and it was part warning of what's to come, talking about surveillance, facial recognition, digital ID, social credit scores. I wrote the book in late 2019. We published it January 30th, 2020, right before all the fun began. And it has nothing to do with pandemics or, any of that sort of stuff. But many of the things I discussed did become reality in the form of vaccine passports and these other things, right? And so the book has become quite popular. And I wrote a second edition. I added 5 new chapters that we published in 2022. It's a post-COVID edition that talks about everything that Miriam and I learned in our own experience, but also as we traveled. We did 50 cities across the US. We did 6 weeks across Mexico, talking to people from all around the world, people who said, I had to get out of Germany, so I sold everything I owned, I moved here, I did this, and hearing how people were able to get around vaccine passports, including, as Konkin predicted, a counter economy for fake vaccine passports, fake vaccine cards, PCR tests. These things were quite easy to do in some places, and there was a whole market for it for people to continue to exist. And that is essentially what he was predicting, that as the state gets more aggressive, there will be this sort of underground outside of the state economy that will pop up. It's always there, but it becomes more relevant once the tyranny is kind of breathing down our neck. So in my view, and what he was talking about is, why don't we get more proactive and put our energy, instead of trying the politics, put our energy into these alternative parallel systems and moving our lives out of these, what I call slavery systems, because that's where they're leading. I mean, you can be all awake as you think, but if you're not taking action, you are still going to get sucked into their technocratic state. You're going to still be facial recognition surveyed, digital ID, CBDC, tracked and trace. No, being awake is not enough anymore, if it ever was. This is why we call our events often an activation. And I talk about getting activated, because it's one thing to be awake and yeah, you're watching podcasts all day telling you, how horrible the world is and confirming your biases. But it's a whole nother thing to step away from that and say, okay, well, what the heck am I going to do? How am I going to make sure that my kids, their kids, my great grandkids, and the people after me that I'm never going to meet are still going to have a chance at freedom? What does that look like? How much work does that take? How much energy does that take? It definitely is not going to happen just sitting around, talking about how bad the world's going to be. And it's definitely not going to happen just clicking through podcasts all day. And I say that as somebody who produces content. Sometimes the most important message is to say, hey, stop watching me and go outside and build a garden. Go outside and get to know your neighbors and get more connected. So the book was, I'll just share a little more about the book and we'll talk about Exit and Build. The book was informed by my experiences as a journalist in Houston. I've been doing this for about 15 years as an activist. I started taking the journalism serious about 10 years ago. And it was because I was leaked some pictures from a Houston Police Department training session that showed me that I was under surveillance because of the activism I was doing. We were out there doing all kinds of extremist things like building community gardens and protesting the government and skill shares, teaching people how to grow their own food, really scary stuff. And so I had another journalist that I knew send me pictures with a projector screen just like this. And it had the name of the activist group that I started was the Houston Freethinkers. And there was the Houston Freethinkers, and there was a picture of me on the screen. And it was taken by an officer in the training session. So I could see other cops just sitting there being told. And this officer said, you might want to let Broze know that they're teaching what they call it, criminal intelligence division officers, that the Houston Freethinkers are some kind of extremist. They made them sound like they were dangerous in some sort of, dark tone. And he's like, I looked into them. It doesn't seem like they're doing anything wrong, but you might want to let them know. And then I was sent another picture. Just basically over 2 months, it was confirmed to me that I had been under surveillance and may still be under in Houston. And so when that happened, it was kind of like, holy crap, this is weird. And I put it out into the public, but also it made me realize I need to take this a little more serious. What does that even mean to be under surveillance, right? Okay, I know there's cameras, but what else is there? I learned about stingrays, which are called cell site simulators, which cops and FBI and government can use to gather all your texts and every data from your phone. Learned about gait detection, facial recognition, heat detection, obviously online cell phone surveillance, all those sort of fun things. And really that has become a major focus of the journalism that I focus on, talking about digital privacy and digital tech tools and how that affects our lives. And so the book, as I said, was kind of a part of a warning of like, there's a lot of scary stuff coming up that if we continue on this road, it's going to be very, very difficult to maintain any level of privacy in the United States. And that's, this was 6 years ago when I was originally writing it. And then it was also a call to action to say, okay, well, what are we actually going to do about it? The book also does talk about the political philosophy called technocracy, which I encourage you to learn more about, because I really think that's the guiding philosophy that we're seeing taking place in our world today. And by the way, the book is available for free at theconsciousresistance.com/how-to. You can also buy a copy back there, but if you can't afford it, you can download the PDF for free. I also have a free audiobook on that same page, theconsciousresistance.com/how-to. And I wanted to put this warning out there and try to provide some examples of how I try to avoid these systems and some ideas I had. And again, I was inspired by Konkin's counter-economics and agorism and building this counter economy. But I took it from beyond just the simple like thinking in terms of finances, but taking that idea and applying it to your food, to the way you interact with technology, to your own healthcare, your education, whether you're talking about the kids' education or just your education as an adult, relationships and so many other areas, and basically took Konkin's idea and just made it a completely holistic vision that I call exit and build. So the idea is to exit from unsustainable, wasteful slavery systems and build alternative systems that actually respect or in line with your values. And again, sometimes perhaps you won't be the one building it. Like, for example, you guys have maybe got to meet Hakeem, who's here helping with the tech stuff. Hakeem does a lot of great work, but piece of his work is the Above phone, and they make privacy laptops and privacy phones. I'm not a technologist. I'm not a coder. I'm not a software engineer. That's not my skill set, but I can help him and get his work in front of more people, so other people realize, hey, there are companies that you can use digital technology and do it in a private way instead of just giving into Microsoft and Apple and Google and all the rest, who we know are willing to spy on us and hand our data over to the government and do not care about any of the values that we have, right? So that's an example of I exit from one system and then I support somebody who is building the new way, and I try to use those in my own life and help others. And another aspect of exit and build can be in terms of physical location. So for example, did anybody here make a move during COVID, like from one city to the next, town, country, state, whatever? Quite a few people, right? That's part of what I call exit and build. So exit and build on one hand is talking about practical things like we're going to focus on today, like getting, changing your habits and your relationships and the way it's like taking the voting with your dollar idea, but applying it to everything you do. But exit and build can also be, hey, I'm living in an area that went super crazy during COVID and they locked it down and masked and this and that and vaccine mandates. But, 60 miles away is this other city where there's a lot more freedom lovers and there's community there. And I think I might have a better luck there. So you exit from one place that you don't think is going to be conducive to liberty and privacy in the long term, and you go build elsewhere and contribute your skills or start fresh. Like that can be part of it as well. And I'm not saying that needs to be a part of it. Some of us might feel like, you know what, I was born here, I'm going to die here, I'm going to hold down the fort, and I'm going to make sure freedom stays alive here. That's valuable too, but it's up to each of us to decide what approach we want to take. But I want to focus on, you guys with me so far? Am I making sense? Yeah, cool, awesome. So I want to talk though about how this exit and build idea can apply holistically. And so we're going to focus on just 5 areas here really briefly: food, technology, health, money, and then we're going to talk about mindset, which I think is probably the most important aspect of this. And I will share that I just concluded a 45-day exit and build challenge that you can find on my website, theconsciousresistance.com. And I'm essentially going to give you like a really quick rundown of that. What it basically was is in the weeks leading up to the election, I was inviting people, whether they're voters or non-voters, to say, look, try this exit and build idea. And week by week, we're going to talk about a different subject: money. We're going to go over what is the problems with the financial system? What are the solutions? And then I'm going to give you some homework. Try to incorporate those things into your life over the coming weeks and see if you actually get change. And if you start seeing the outcome of your actions, as opposed to just voting and expecting that that's going to solve all your problems, or not voting, but doing nothing else. Because I don't think it's enough to just say, yeah, of course, we all know the system's screwed and I'm not going to participate. Good. But that's not really enough, I think, at least if you want to stay free in the long term. We have to actually try to obtain these, live these principles so we can actually obtain freedom in our lifetime. So food, the obvious problem there is we have poisoned food with pesticides and soil depletion. And we all get it, right? There's a reason people are looking for organic and healthier options and trying to get more connected to their farmers. Who here goes to a farmer's market? Heck yes, we're in the right room, right? Okay. Who volunteers or is a part of a community garden, urban farm, CSA, some sort of community agriculture type thing? A few hands. Very cool. Who knows who has a relationship with whatever your diet, whether you eat meat, eggs, vegan, vegetarian, who has a relationship with the people who produce those food, whether it's yourself or somebody? Cool. Some hands going up. Then that's exactly what I'm talking about, right? But the average person, and even more than half this room, are disconnected from our food supply and are dependent on, and even in a beautiful town like this, you got natural grocers, but if the shit hits the fan, that food's going to disappear just as quick as anything else, and so you can see the value in not being dependent on that system. And you could get deeper into it and talk about government subsidies with some groceries and big chains and all these other reasons. But for me, it should be enough to just say, I don't want to be dependent on these systems that not only, when you really look at the way the food distribution and food production systems, you can get into like, whether you're a meat eater or not, factory farming, the abuse of animals, the abuse to the planet, the waste, all this stuff. There's so many reasons to not want to support those systems, at least in my mind, where I'm coming from with my values. So the solution then is to go try to get as close to growing your own food. That's more of a full-time job. It's easier said than done. Some people are doing it, but if you can't do it, then as I was mentioning, like getting closer to those relationships, going to the farmer's market and actually getting to know the person that is raising the chickens that you're getting the eggs from, maybe actually visiting it directly face to face. And during COVID, we saw how important this was happening when they were trying to shut down certain people. If you've got your produce guy on your phone, or you got him on a messenger, you can just meet up in the dark parking lot at night and illegally trade goods when they tell you not to go outside. You're just trading some veggies. I swear we don't mean any harm. But that's how weird things got for a while. And you could see the importance of having those relationships, right? So again, we're in a space of relative calm where people think everything's fine. We're about to go into the election. I really do fear for what type of chaos or false flag or whoever knows what could be up ahead. And, not to call in into those things, but those are realities that do exist. And so why not be in the path of being forward thinking and action oriented and better prepared, as opposed to just hoping and praying that nothing goes wrong, right? We want to be able to take, the way I see it is like, the more I'm taking care of myself, the more opportunity I have to help other people, instead of being in a scarcity mindset and being like, sorry, I can't help you, or even worse, get back. This is our food. Keep away, zombies. Instead, being able, here's some seeds, here's some tools, here's some things that we can offer because we've been building, and now we can help other people who perhaps need help later. Technology. So we all know the technology is spying on us in different ways. Again, this is not something I think we need to just accept. There is the above phone. There's nomooregoogle.com, privacytools.io, takebackourtech.org, nomooregoogle.com, privacytools.io, takebackourtech.org. Each of those websites will give you guides and resources of how to get off Gmail, how to get off Google, how to get off these, to me, big tech companies that, again, wouldn't exist without government intelligence money, seed money from NQTEL, the CIA's venture capital firm, and who are also willing to build censored versions of the internet for the Chinese government. Google's working on the Dragonfly drone program. We could go on and on. For me, again, the reasons that doesn't really align with what I believe. So why not use better tools? And guess what? They do exist, but you're not going to go to the local electronics store and find the above phone or find something like that. You got to go out of your way to find these tools, because these big tech companies have basically monopolized the market. And so you're going to go there and you're going to see Apple, Google, Microsoft, etc. But there are other people who are creating privacy search engines, privacy emails, and now we're getting to the hardware devices, and not only that, but people who are trying to reduce the impacts of the various digital technology that we use. It's just about putting the time and energy into that. So you're going to exit from these slavery spying systems and build and or support those who are building the alternatives. Health. We all recognize in COVID how important it is to be more in control of our health. I'm not here to tell you what's the right modality or pathway for you. I know some people totally swear off all of allopathic medicine or Western medicine or whatever sort of way they want to divide it. Others are more focused on energy and other things. Whatever works for you, that's up to you to decide. But the point is, you should be in control of that, and you should be the one who's guiding that policy. And if you're in a situation which some of us can't help, whether by age or just disease, genetics, etc. There are people who maybe are like, hey, I have to take this diabetes medicine, or I have to take this treatment that I can't get from, our alternative systems yet. It shows you, and I think David was mentioning this, how we have to build these new systems. These new systems need to be created in the market for us to eventually be able to get there, right? My focus is, how do we do that? How do we start creating that next stage? Ultimately, I think we just need to take our health back and in our hands. And that means, of course, being able to decide what you put in your body, what you don't put in your body, whether that's an injection or not. The government shouldn't be the one deciding what what treatments you need to take, or if there's fluoride in your water or any of that kind of stuff. And so we have to take personal responsibility again, because they're not going to do it for us. Does anybody in here trust the FDA to take care of them? I didn't think so. Right. So then who's going to take care of you? Yeah, us, we're going to have to take care of each other, right? I mean, that's really what it comes down to. So exit from those systems. Don't be dependent on it. Money, this is probably the key to probably the whole house of cards: the financial system, Federal Reserve system, central banking, fractional reserve, debt-based monetary system. The problems are obvious, I think, to everybody in this room. I kind of touched on earlier the importance of alternative currencies. I do use crypto. I don't think it's a perfect tool. Bitcoin has been co-opted and will continue to be co-opted by a lot of shady people as they make it more and more mainstream. I still do use Monero though. And I'll share that. I mean, we have land in Mexico, and we made a payment recently, and we were able to move that money around. Let's say, imagine you needed to make a $30,000 payment to somebody. What's the way you can send that without the government alarm going off? Cash. If you can send $30,000 cash in the mail without the USPS opening it, I mean, you could though, or meet in person, right? But let's say over long distances, because that's really the problem we're trying to solve, right? Like, let's say you need to, I'm in Mexico, you're in the US, or you're in Europe, and I need to send $30,000 cash to make a payment, or $30,000 to make a payment on my thing. If I send it through PayPal or I send it through my bank, it's definitely going to set off certain alarms. I'm going to get the IRS reaching out to me. But this is possible, and I'm speaking from experience, to do these sorts of larger transactions using things like Monero. And so I'm not here to shill crypto as the one only perfect solution that's going to solve our problems. Again, I've written about and talked about the dangers of blockchain and some of the worrisome aspects of tokenizing everything, but it's a tool. And there are ways that many brilliant people are trying to use tools like crypto to maintain privacy and to allow us to still exchange over long distances. You know, I couldn't walk across the border with $20,000 cash without getting harassed. And maybe I could try to carry some gold bars and silver, but that might be heavy and I'd probably get it stolen from me on the way. But I could walk across the border with that much and more on a USB drive of Monero and they wouldn't know the difference, right? So my point is, to me, I use the alternative tools that work. If there comes a time that those tools don't work, I adapt. That's another thing I think we need to be as adaptable as we are in this very changing world. And one tool, one practice, one strategy might work for a certain period of time, and then it might not. And then you have to learn to adjust and adapt. So the financial side is huge, and we need to find ways to exit from that system and build alternative systems. I think there will always be a need for currency. So whether it is just we stick to cash, the point is they're already working, they being the US government in this case, but governments all over the world and the Bank of International Settlements, they're working on central bank digital currencies. And even if certain politicians don't push that, there's other ways they can get the same effect. They're also working on things like stable coins. And, you know, again, it's a whole nother conversation, but the point is there are governments all around the world that are working on trackable, traceable digital money. That's not the same thing as Monero. So I think while the tool's available, it might be worth using or at least learning about. And then the way that all this ties in together, because this is, you know, you think about these ideas. How do you even start on this journey? You're like, I'm one person. We had some great conversations earlier with people who were saying, well, we're at this place in our life. We have a vision of getting there, but not really sure how to get there yet. Community is the key. It is very difficult to do all these things just by yourself. If you're a couple, single parent, single person, whatever it may be, especially if you're not extremely wealthy, this can sound overwhelming, and I totally get that. But also what I'm communicating does not require you to be rich to make these things happen. But I do think community is necessary to make it happen. We can't, or I don't think it'll be easy to move forward in such a way all on yourself. We need strength in numbers. We understand the power of that, the beauty of that. And I want to invite you guys to check out freedomcells.org. It's freedom, CELLS.org. The website exists there as just a place. Like, if I know there's people coming from all over. If you're coming from somewhere where you don't have local community, is there anybody in that situation who came here today, but wherever you're coming from, you don't really know anybody, kind of feel isolated? I know I talked to you guys earlier, a couple of you guys back here. So for those of you in that situation, Freedom Cells, one of the main benefits of it is you can sign up. It looks just like a social network in a way, but it's not intended to be that at all. It's a place for you to put, here's my skills, here's my interests, here are my goals. You plant yourself on the map. Don't put your home address, but just, you know, your town or wherever you live. And then you can search and say, show me all the members that live within 10 miles. Show me all the members who are interested in permaculture within 10 miles, or show me all the groups that exist within 20 miles, you know, and go out as far as you need to. And you'll find groups, you'll find people on there. And I always tell people, if you go on there and you don't see anybody, we nominate you to start the one in your area, because some of us got to step up, right? You know, we can't sit around waiting for other people to do this. There's also a lot of people, anybody on the Telegram app. So if you're on Telegram, you search Freedom Cell Network, you'll see there, and just pop in and say hi, and then I can help you get directed to your local group. The beautiful thing about this is I've been involved with promoting this idea since 2016 when I first heard about it. And I started doing a bunch of videos like, okay, Freedom Cells applied to building gardens, Freedom Cells applied to homeschooling, Freedom Cell, you know, just thinking of how this concept could be used in different ways. It's essentially just mutual aid groups, decentralized networks. You build a Sedona Freedom Cell, we got a Houston Freedom Cell. Then as we grow and we're focused on these parallel systems, I believe in the long term, these are going to be part of like trade routes and us trading resources and ideas and skills. That's kind of like big picture long term, but I think that's what we're laying the foundation for. So you use the website and it'll show you groups that already exist, people that exist. And if you don't find anybody there, on the Freedom Cell Network on Telegram, there's hundreds and hundreds of groups. This idea really took off in 2020 when we had about 1,000 people on the website. And then Bill Gates started talking all his nonsense, and he's the best player on our team. He brought like 40,000 people to the website. And, you know, it's always funny to me because for whatever reason, us silly, beautiful, powerful human beings, sometimes we have to be pushed to act. I've been talking about this idea for years, but it took for lockdowns for people then all of a sudden like, wait, maybe community is important. Maybe I do want to find people in my area. And we just saw this massive growth. And so as we were touring in 2021 and when we came here in Sedona and other places, we were meeting people who said, we've been locked down and we've been using the Freedom Cell network to find each other. Now we're meeting in secret, like at somebody's house and like all the crazy stuff. But the point is people used it as a resource in the way that we knew could happen. People were finding each other. They were organizing events and they weren't doing it on Facebook. They weren't doing it on other places. And it was helping people realize they weren't alone. And that to me was like, yes, it's working. It's, that's all we did is we just put the website out there, promote the idea, but what it becomes depends on each of us, right? Like each cell, each group looks different based on the needs, the resources, the environment, the goals. And I always encourage each group to get together and set goals, set 6 months goals. Like, let's say you get together and it's a group of parents and you realize we're all interested in homeschooling, or we all want to learn about permaculture, or we want to learn more about getting off big tech. Set goals for yourself individually and as a group and start moving towards that. I mean, I think this is how practical and tangible we need to be about our liberty if we actually want to achieve it, not just strictly philosophical, abstract, thinking, but actually practically applying this to our lives. And so I think community is a really important part of that. Again, that's freedomcells.org. If you come by the table after my talk or later today, and you're on Telegram, I'll help you get connected to your local group, or we'll start your local group together and we'll see what comes of that. And I think that's just been a beautiful thing to watch that grow. We actually just came back from the UK 3 weeks ago, hosting our first event. We hosted an event in Mexico in January. Etienne's got to speak there before. A few others have been there. It's called the People's Reset. It was originally called the Greater Reset. We launched it in the middle of COVID as well. And it's a 5-day solutions-focused event. And we just did our first one in the UK. We did some talks in Denmark. And there are people all over the world, just like you guys, trying to think about this. Now, the scary thing is when we were in Denmark, they already have digital IDs. It's called My ID. Can't open a bank account without it. Can't use public transportation without it. You can't pay your bills without it. It's not mandatory, but try functioning without it. That's basically how they do it, right? And so, but again, that room was filled with 70 people, and I'm talking to them about these ideas, and then it just turned into a brainstorming session of, well, how can we avoid this? And, so they're not giving up. Even in the face of that, they're not like just, okay, fine, it's over. We lost our freedom. They're committed to it. So there's people who are doing this exit and build strategy. They're buying land outside of the big city. They're starting to grow their own food, even in the face of this digital ID, because they're like, okay, it's gotten this far. We need to make sure that we are not any more dependent on this system as possible. And that's the way they get you. Like if you're looking at these different areas, or you look at your life, what I call a holistic self-assessment. So we did money, technology, food, health. You could do your education, relationships. You just start to look at these different areas of your life and to see what your goal is. Food-wise, I want to be eating 100% organic. I want to, all local grown, or maybe I want to grow it all myself from my homestead. But right now, I'm dependent on the grocery store. I've got a little plant on the windowsill. It's fine. See where you're at now, see where the goal is, and start creating an exit plan. 6 months, a year, whatever it is. What are the steps you need to do to at least be closer to that goal? I'm not saying you're going to be a farmer by the end of the year per se, but maybe at least the goal is to have better relationships with those who are growing food, visiting the farmers markets more, establishing those relationships. So you start getting very specific and practical about how you're going to make these steps happen. And this is what we're doing. We bought our land last year in Mexico, got fruit trees, got beautiful springs. We're going to host events there eventually. We're building a community out there. As I said, I stay out of the banking system and I don't talk to some of those 3-letter agencies. And I try to just stay out of their systems as much as possible because I know that I'll be better served in the long run to not be dependent on it. When you do this self-assessment and you see the areas where, like, again, maybe it's money and you're like, I've got like $50,000 worth of debt, or for those of you who are younger and maybe have some college debt, those are things you want to think about. How are you going to get that handled as soon as possible? Because just like we saw during COVID, these different areas where we have some improvement to do, these are like the squeeze areas. These are how they're going to squeeze you to get you to comply, right? If you're totally dependent, and this is a real thing that a lot of people are dealing with. Like I have many people who follow me and say, Derrick, I hear you, but I only get $800 a month and it's from Social Security from government. I wouldn't survive right now without it. I don't know how to get off that thing. And I don't have the perfect answer for that. But the point is we need to start thinking about these things. Look at those areas where you have these weaknesses or these vulnerabilities and try to strengthen them, because that is the way they will squeeze you. Like we saw in COVID, you need to go to the grocery store, we'll put on a mask or show us your proof of vaccine. You want to travel, well then show, all these different things. You want to come to our college, you want to come to our school, proof of vaccine, wear a mask, etc. So because we have these dependencies on those systems, they're able to socially engineer what they want, which is apply pressure, use the media, peer pressure from our friends and family. Anybody lose friends or family during COVID for your choices? A lot of people. And again, it's not my business, whatever choices you make, but doesn't that suck to lose people that you care about because of that? That pressure will get worse and it will come back, whether it's about climate change, whether it's about a new claimed pandemic or any other thing. That sort of social engineering and public pressure, which is used to divide us, will come back. And it sucks and it's not a fun thing. But the point is, if you're not dependent on those systems, you will be in a much more free place to not only help yourself, but to help other people in the future. Now, the final part of this exit and build thing I'll focus on for these last few minutes is mindset. I think this is really key to everything, because if we have a mindset of negative beliefs and limiting thoughts, then everything I'm saying right now might sound impossible. Or maybe the first thing your brain is thinking is why it would fail. You know, I meet these people a lot on the internet. Like anything I might suggest, like, oh yeah, but what about this? Or what about this thing? And what about this thing? And you know, it's like I could do that all day. And usually what I tell them is, sure, is it possible that we decide to exit from these different systems and, you know, we're getting land, and not to say that everybody needs to get land, although I think that is a valuable thing to do. But even if you're living in the city, living in the suburbs, you could still apply this strategy to all these areas of your life. But they'll say, so you're going to try to grow your own food and establish a community. One day, bad people with guns are going to come kill y'all, or going to come, you know, the tyranny is going to come to your doorstep. And yes, in the infinite realm of all possibilities, that is a possibility. Could that happen? Sure. Everything is possible. But are they essentially trying to say, so because one day, potentially, maybe something bad could happen, I should do nothing? I should just continue to do the same old thing over and over? To me, it just reeks of excuses and having given up already, you know? Whereas to me, it's like, look, if that was the worst case scenario, that one day bad people, whether they're just street criminals or government agents, come and try to take out me and my loved ones and the beautiful community we've designed, then that would suck. But at least I would be able to die knowing that I did everything I could to live in line with my values and principles. And in the process, I got to live amongst like-minded people, eat organic food, drink clean water, you know, have a really amazing life in the process. So my point is that our mindset is so essential. Now, I'll just share really briefly that some of you know this story, but I'll just share a brief version of it. My website's called The Conscious Resistance for a reason. I speak about the philosophy of liberty and also how I think that intersects with spirit and the search for meaning in our internal world. And this is, for me, is an essential part. I essentially believe that we can't only confront the physical institutions of power, and we also can't only meditate and pray our problems away. I think it's the combination of bringing these two things together, the fight against your own internal tyrant, which is your doubt, fears, insecurities, and limiting beliefs that often can hold you back and prevent you from being the best version of yourself. It's that, plus recognizing that there are people and institutions and things we can point to that are causing problems, and we should confront those things, and we should try to be free of those systems. But I think you can't have one without the other. At least this has been my experience. And the reason I say that is because I spent a lot of my young life really depressed. I mean, suicide attempts 3 times before I was 18. I got addicted to alcohol and drugs right after high school. I was a really intelligent dude, went into college early when all my friends were still in high school, but I was just drowning in depression and like lack of self-love and self-esteem and so many other things that I was struggling with. And that led me to cutting myself and, like I said, suicide attempts, and then eventually drugs. And after a 2-year period, I found myself locked up in prison at 21 years old. And it was in that space that I really decided, like, I needed to go a different path. I grew up in a family of drug addicts and alcoholics. I've seen what that road looks like, and I knew I wanted something different. And thankfully, I had a really powerful grandmother who was a big spiritual influence in my life. And she started sending me books on prayer and on meditation. And it was just a very useful tool for me, as well as journaling while I was locked up, to really start to get to the root of why I was using drugs. I thought I was having fun, but really I was just masking all this stuff I didn't want to deal with related to my relationships with my father. And so as I started to uncover these things and doing that work, I think I experienced happiness for the first time in my life at the age of 23. And was really like, oh, wow, this is like, I'm excited to be alive. And then I got out of prison. I was now a part of the drug war. I was a felon, so I couldn't get jobs in certain places. I couldn't get rented certain places. I got the judgment from different people. And that was the beginning of my awakening, of me starting to kind of like question government. And like, I don't think, even though I was addicted to crystal meth, I don't think I should have been thrown in a cage, because that was just a decision I was making for myself. I needed help for sure, but throwing me in a cage full of people who truly have no regard for life isn't how you fix somebody. But I had the wherewithal in myself to make those changes. The reason I share all that is to say that I think that it's so important that we interrogate our mindset and our internal conversation that we have with ourselves. Because if we have that negative self-talk, and I was that person, if everything up here was just so negative, it was judging all of you, it was attacking myself, it was just all this stuff that I picked up, and I had to unlearn it and learn better ways. And if you're coming from that place, then it's hard to imagine. Well, for one, it's hard to even care about the world around you if you don't care about yourself. That's kind of where I was in the past. Like, I didn't trust the government, but I was just trying not to kill myself that day. You know, I was just trying to make it through another day. And when I got through that, I realized there's so many of us struggling in different ways, big and small. Some seem small compared to others. Some are more bold and obvious, and others are good at hiding their things inside. But I truly believe, no matter how old you are, what age you are, what background you come from, how big you are on the internet, that everybody's got doubts, fears, insecurities, and various levels of trauma, just as being part of the human species, that we can uncover and we can heal. And I'm saying this, I want to say this part really quickly, just specifically to the men in the room, because we are also taught that we should never show emotion, or we should never talk about those kind of things. That we think that's some sort of strength to kind of mask it and hide from those things. But in fact, like, I think that's been another propaganda that's been sold to us for so long, that a strong, empowered man is able to, like, deal with his shit and to be real about it, and then to show up and say, like, look, I'm an example of an in-process healing man that knows how to be real about it. And I'm not saying we all need to sob on each other's shoulders, although there's nothing wrong with that either, but it's an important part for us to be able to step out and deal with the reality of the things we might have inside. And that is another part of their control system. Until we're able to deal with that deeper trauma, we might create new systems. We might, overthrow the government, install all the right people and stuff. But if we don't deal with that internal work, it may take a couple of generations, but before you know it, we will cycle back and recreate these same things. This is the root of revolution, that word revolving, going in circles. We want to step out of that. So I just want to really emphasize that as I wrap up here, that all the other pieces are important: getting land, stocking up food, learning new skills, everything. But if we don't do that internal work, and we're not working on better communication with each other and with our own hearts and our own minds, then I fear that we will end up creating these same things over and over. And yeah, that's what my work is about, the conscious resistance. And I had a note here. I'll just add this one before we wrap up. I wrote down sheep, slave, and asleep. I just want to say, I've never known a single person who's woken up by being called a slave, a sheep, or asleep. So maybe reflect on that, however that hits you. Maybe we can approach the way we look at our brothers and sisters, because ultimately, even these people who are fucking driving me crazy on the internet right now are my brothers and sisters. Thank God, I pray for you every day. And we all have blind spots, right? My point is, let's really rethink the way we approach other people. If we're really coming from a place of not just ego of like, I want to be right and convince other people that I got the world view that's right and I'm better than them, but instead we actually want to hit their heart and help them begin their journey of awakening, because it's a process, right? You're not just awake and that's it. It's a process. Then maybe the way we approach our brothers and sisters who are struggling, let's say at the moment, or who are falling for, I would say, dead ends and false ideas and false principles, maybe we can find a better way to reach them. And that starts in here as well. So I'm going to wrap up now. Guys, thank you so much for your time and your attention. I'm going to do my affirmation. If anybody wants to join me, this is on my t-shirts back there. It's a positive affirmation that I started using years ago when I was locked up, and it's helped me over the years. It's also just the truth. So if you feel inclined, if you resonate with it, feel free to repeat it after me. And again, my name's Derrick Broze. You can find us back there at the table. So feel free to repeat this if you like it, if you resonate with it. I am powerful. I am beautiful. And I am free. Thank you guys so much.
Hi, this is Etienne de la Boissy from the Art of Liberty Foundation. If you liked this presentation from the 2024 Liberty on the Rocks conference in Sedona, then you are going to love the Art of Liberty Foundation's upcoming book, Voluntarism: How the Only Ism, Fair for Everyone, Leads to Harmony, Prosperity, and Good Karma for All. The book is in the same image and meme-rich format of Government, the Biggest Scam in History Exposed, featuring the executive summary of the executive summary to rapidly understand the important issues. If you or anyone you know has any doubt that the free market could provide all the legitimate, non-redistributive services provided by government better, faster, and cheaper without the waste, fraud, abuse, and extortion, then this is the book for you. You can pre-order a copy of the book through our $25,000 Indiegogo campaign to launch the book and get it into wide distribution at volunteerism-book.org.